Welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. I don't know about you, but I am counting the days till spring. And today's podcast is meant to bring a little spring joy to your step. I have Ashley Belote on with me. She is an amazing author illustrator. She's written things like she's illustrated Valenslime. She has done Sheepwrecked, Don't Wash Winston, Witch and Wombat. Her newest one is Little Red and Big Bad Fred. And today we are going to be diving into the world of early childhood and unpacking magical ways that you can connect STEM and STEAM to the read aloud. This is a great one for you if you are a parent or grandparent, an early childhood or elementary educator, a librarian, or just somebody who wants to have a good time and laugh with us. So Ashley, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. I always love our conversations and I love getting into the nitty-gritty of how you can make picture books beyond the book of an experience for kids. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. And one of the things I love so much about your work, Ashley, is you kind of hand that to us in a package because your books are so full of joy and humor and energy and cool things that leap off the page where you can go, how could I have a kid help me solve that problem? And I know
Exactly.
you and I have talked about it, and I was going to just start with Sheepwrecked for a minute, just to remind people that Sheepwrecked is so punny. It's bad with all the puns.
Bad girl, yes.
But you've got these sheep who are sailing the seven seas with all kinds of woolly adventures and puns. But you and I talked last year about some of the ways that you could take the actions of the sheep and bring them into an early childhood setting. Can you start by sharing some of the ways that you do it, and then I'll chime in with some of mine, and then we'll just work our way back into Little Red.
Perfect. Yes, I love every one of our conversations because we always I think of new things as we're talking to. And I think one of the reasons that I incorporate this type of content in the books that I work on is from my time in the classroom. I spent about 5 years in the pre-K classroom, and I loved it when I would do story time, and the story would then lead to something else. Again, creating that beyond just the book experience for kids. So with Sheepwrecked, there's this whole crew of pirate sheep and they come upon a treasure that belongs to none other than Wooly Jones, the scariest sheep in the seven seas. And
Mwahaha.
it's mwahaha or bahaha. And so from there, they're navigating an adventure, of course. There is a teamwork aspect of this story too, which I think is important for all STEM and STEAM mentality. You've got to learn to, of course, work on your own and by yourself, but you also really need to learn how to work together and use your team and your friends and your partners. And so they navigate this adventure as a team. There is all kinds of mapping opportunities in here. One of my favorite things about Sheepwrecked is the end papers of this book because it is literally a map. And so you can pull so many projects from that aspect of it. I also always incorporate art because, again, I'm an illustrator. I started out as an illustrator first. And I think that art can help us so much in different aspects of life, but in particular with literacy. I think that, we're seeing that in the advent of graphic novels nowadays because they're so visual that they're helping the reluctant reader. So I always incorporate art into each lesson that I teach with my books. So there's so many things, and I'll kick it over to you now because you did that wonderful sink and float project with this. So I'm handing it over to you.
So that's the other thing is you can always find a challenge in a book. No matter what picture book you're reading, you can come up with an invitation to the kids to
Yes.
collaborate and to think critically about how do you solve a problem. And so with Sheepwrecked, the challenge that we presented was how do you determine what's going to sink and what's going to float because the sheep wreck. And so we played with water and we set it up where the kids were graphing and they were testing hypotheses. So there were all kinds of just random things you'd find around the room. So they might test a rock. Is the rock going to sink? Is the rock going to float? They have to predict then they test it, then they graph it. And so as they're going along, they're setting a list of, oh, okay, so all of these things sink, but wait, the Lego floated, the popsicle stick floated, the cork floated. Why are those things floating? And so they're starting to think about, density. They may not be using
Sure.
that word, but they're thinking about density. They're thinking about
Yes.
buoyancy. And you then apply that to this challenge of, can you build something that will keep our sheep afloat?
Mhm.
And that became the really fun extension is they had to design a ship using, again, random materials you'd find in the classroom. You can use Legos, toilet paper tubes, foil, craft sticks. You can use paper plates, whatever it is you've got around. Let the kids explore, let them test materials. And this is really important. Let them fail because we learn from our mistakes. And honestly, I don't even like using that word mistakes. We learn from when things don't go well if we have a
Sure.
chance to redesign and test it again. So, why
Mhm.
didn't that work? What do you think you need to do to get it to float? And so,
Right.
as long as you keep sort of that forward thinking mentality, that growth learning mindset,
Yeah.
kids are resilient and they'll keep coming up with iterations. So I love Sheepwrecked because it sort of opens the door to all of that. But you've got so many other books that also do that. I mean, Valenslime and Frankenslime are they didn't even require me to think in
No.
terms of what to do because they've both got slime recipes. You can have kids test a written slime recipe, but then you can have them create their own and see if they can get their neighbor to follow that recipe. So you're doing things with measurement, you're experimenting with texture, with color, with smell, proportions. It's a little bit of chemistry. So that one's a really easy one to solve a problem with.
Yeah.
But some of the others, they may not look like on the surface that they would, but they do offer these amazing invitations. I was looking at Don't Wash Winston this morning and give them a setup about what that one's about. Just,
Oh, I love Don't Wash Winston. This was probably one of my like closest to my heart stories that I've worked on. It's all about a little kid, Liam, whose favorite teddy bear, Winston, gets muddy from making mud pies. There's a fun stem right there, and has to go into the big, scary washing machine. Ah! So it's a big face your fears narrative. But again, there's so many things that you can pull from it. And not only is this one of my favorite stories because it's near and dear to me, it is actually a real story that happened to me when I was little. I thought that my bear thought making mud pies would be so fun. I'm sure that he loved it up
I'm sure
until
he
the
did
point where
too.
he got muddy. So, you get so many things I think from picture books that are beyond just the surface message. But I love when there is a surface message that you can pull something constructive from, like facing your fears or being kind or learning to work as a team. So with Don't Wash Winston, you've got that first layer of learning how to face a fear and also a second layer of compassion. This little kid is caring for this bear deeply. And I think that's something that is really important to teach kids from a young age as well, that you need to care about the things and take care of the things that mean the most to you. But then, of course, we can go into the imaginative space and start pulling some activities. That one is great for the mud pie thing is amazing. I actually have done a few presentations and events at libraries where we've done this before. And then we've also roped in a teamwork aspect of this as well. So we did a mud pie making relay race. So you had to, well, first they had to craft a pan out of, again, random materials similar to the Sink and Float Sheepwrecked project. You had to craft something to put your pie into. Then, of course, you had to make the pie, which everybody wanted to do that step. That was the most popular step. And then you had to make it, and then you had to carry it to somebody else to put into the oven. And each person did something different until they were presented at like the table for eating at the end. So I think that all of these projects that you and I are discussing, they could certainly be executed by just one person or a group of people could participate in them. And that's another reason why I love the things that you come up with because you can adapt them to a single setting or a group setting.
Well, and I love the fact that you were talking about that element of compassion in
Yes.
Don't Wash Winston, because I think that empathy and compassion are huge things that we should be teaching, not just in early childhood, but all the way up. But it starts, that seed starts with our youngest learners.
Yeah.
And part of that compassion could feed into your STEM activity or STEM
Mhm.
experience, because you could ask kids, how do we help the little boy? How do we help this child protect the bear when the bear has to go into the big scary washing machine? And so maybe your challenge is to develop a contraption that keeps the bear safe inside the washing machine. Or
Oh, yeah.
maybe you have to develop something that keeps the bear from getting muddy while you're making mud pies so that you're
Mhm.
preventing another washing machine incident. So you could prototype and test it on teddy bears that you have
Oh, yeah.
in your learning environment. And if they
Mhm.
get muddy, then you have an opportunity to experience
To
the washing
wash them.
machine. So you're
And it will be
subjected to the
okay. It
book.
will be okay.
So you're able to address that fear as well, but it's that whole idea of it's okay to get messy. The Miss
Yes.
Frizzle mentality, get messy, make mistakes, test things out, and learn through that playful,
Mhm.
joyful iteration.
Yes.
So let's
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about your latest book. Let's talk
Yes.
about Little Red and Big Bad Fred. Tell us what prompted this book. Give us a little bit about what it's about. And if you want to share a few of your favorite pages, do it.
Yes, I would, of course, love to share. So, Little Red and Big Bad Fred is all about Little Red, who is going to great grandpa's because he loves to visit his great grandpa, but he also loves to visit his friend Fred along the way. And of course, Fred is the big bad wolf, but Little Red does not understand this. He at first thinks that Big Bad Fred is a cat. Wrong. So we eventually get to Great Grandpa's house, and that is when Red introduces Great Grandpa to Fred. And poor Great Grandpa says, Little Red, that is not a cat. He says, that is a dog.
So we get this naturally.
Oh my gosh. Poor people, yes. And then poor Fred is over here like, I'm not a dog, I'm a wolf. I'm very scary indeed. So you get this whole back and forth of like the audience knows what is true, but the character doesn't. So it's a really fun read aloud for that reason. And it was so much fun to work on just because I've never really worked on a fractured fairy tale before. And I love the idea of taking something that already exists and then putting her own spin on it was very special. And it's kind of an honor to be a part of this like fairy tale legacy with this. And these are the back end papers. This is one of my favorite scenes in the whole story. They're at the end where, Fred kind of accepts his fate as a dog and gets to sleep at the foot of Little Red's bed every night, which is way better than the forest. So it's, the best of both worlds. So it was, like I said, it was really fun and a neat adventure of my own, just because, like I said, it was interesting to work from an established concept, but figure out a way to totally spin it. And the kind of the first idea that I had for this book, I was drawing a portfolio piece. And I have tons of like bears and wombats and sheep and like cute round fluffy characters in my portfolio. So I'm like looking through it and I'm like, man, I need like a wolf or something different. So I was drawing this wolf and then I was drawing this kid and the wolf was like hiding behind a tree and I was like, "Oh, it's like they're playing hide and seek." And then I was like, wouldn't it be hilarious if this kid thought that this wolf was like a cat instead of the big, and that's kind of how the whole thing got started. So I love that, that creative process that happens while you're not really understanding what's going on in your brain. It's just crafting this narrative. And so I just kind of took the idea and spun it from there.
And for the grown-ups listening, I want to highlight something you just said. You went into this without a specific plan. You were just playing. And that
Hmm.
is so important because I think often we think that learning through play is only for kids. But there's a huge component of that that's there for us as adults. And when
Mhm.
we give ourselves that freedom to play, to mess around, to push boundaries, to test things,
Yeah,
then there are all kinds of things that might come through that we weren't expecting. In your case, a brand new story.
exactly right.
I think it's
Exactly.
so cool. I am going to grab something that I have for us because I want to talk to you about a science STEM connection that I think we can make with Little Red
Yay.
and Big Bad Fred. So, one of the things that struck me as I read this book is there's a disconnect between the two characters for a good portion of the book
Hmm.
because you've got Little Red who is in love with Fred, whether Fred is a cat, a dog, or a wolf dog.
Yeah.
And Fred is so conflicted through this whole thing. Like, do I
Yeah.
eat him? Do I love him? And it doesn't really gel until the very end where Fred discovers that they can be friends. Or, yeah. And so, what I thought about is often when I'm working with kids and adults, and I'm in a workshop, I love to use the energy stick. And I think you've seen this before.
Yes, I have. Oh, yes.
Steve Spangler markets it, and when I use it, I usually I follow something that Steve taught me, which is I'll play dumb with the kids and I'll play dumb with the adults, and I'll be like, I just got this, and I have no idea how it works, and eventually somebody will help me figure it out. And for those who don't know, you've got this tube, and there are on both ends a place where you can grab it, and when you do, it lights up and makes noise. You've built a circuit or a connection. Now, the thing I love to do with kids is then to let them play. Just, after we figured it out and we figured out that we can build a circuit, and like if you and I were in the same room, Ashley, I would give you this, you would hold an end, we would play, we would build a circuit. I would tell the kids, well, I don't think you can do it with more than two people. At which point they're like, oh, give me that. And they start figuring it out. And by the time you turn your back, the entire room is connected. And they
Yes.
figured out you can build a connection with everybody. So then it's like, well, does it only work if we're holding it with our hands? And so you start experimenting, and you might look at insulators and conductors. And so, for example, you just put out a bunch of materials and let them play. So I have a spoon, a metal spoon, and I have the energy stick, and they're going to conduct. I'm holding the spoon, I'm holding the thing, and when you put them together, they're making some noise.
Perfect.
Same thing like with these, I have metal tongs. There you go. So you're getting a good connection. But if I were to bring out a wooden spoon, do you think it's going to connect, or is it going to be an insulator?
Nope, not going to connect.
And you're right, it didn't connect. So you've got an insulator. If I do it to my clothes, same thing, but the clothes are an insulator. They're not going to light it up. What about if I try it with foil? What do you think?
I think it might.
Sure enough, we've got a conductor. What about paper towel?
No, I don't think so.
All right, and you're right. The paper towel on its own is an insulator. So we've given them that chance, and right now it still doesn't really connect to the book, other than you could argue that, Fred is an insulator, and there are all these things that are keeping him from connecting to Little Red.
Mhm.
So here's their challenge. Can you take something that's an insulator and turn it into a conductor?
Okay, there you go. And we see the change. I
And we see the
see.
change. And so we could start with our wooden spoon. What do you think we could do to the wooden spoon that would turn it into a conductor?
We could wrap it in foil.
All right, let's try that. So we've got some foil, and I'm going to wrap it in the foil. I'm going to try to make sure I cover my spoon all the way. All right. And then let's try it.
Oh,
Sure enough.
yeah.
All right, so that would be sort of like the love that Little Red gave to Big Bad Fred. It turned him into a conductor. But
Absolutely.
we could also do it with this paper towel. How would we do it to the paper towel? What do you think?
Hmm. We could use foil, or we could try to wrap it in foil like we just did with the wooden spoon because we saw that that worked. Or we could try to somehow wrap it maybe around the fork and use the tips of the fork.
Ooh, I like those thoughts. I have
Hmm.
another one that you can present too.
Oh,
What's in here?
Water.
And when you
Yes.
get your paper towel wet, and I'm about to make a giant mess in my office, but that's okay.
Oh, that's okay. Again, we love to make messes.
Exactly. So I'm going to dip the paper towel in water, and let's just see what happens when we have a wet paper towel. All right. I might have to get it all. Let me just get it all the way.
I think we're going for the big mess.
Oh, we are. Because,
Yes.
anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
Oh, absolutely. That should be on a stone somewhere. That is a great quote.
It's a Steve Spangler original, but I love that one.
So
All right.
good. You just adapt it.
And check that out. Wet paper towels, suddenly we have a conductor. So you're not going to tell the kids any of this. You're going to let them experiment and figure it out for themselves.
Mhm.
Put the supplies out, let them play. And then once they've figured out how to meet that challenge, then you can bring it back to the book and talk about how you just found a way to help Fred and Little Red build a real
Right.
connection. And then you can talk about, how do you do that in your own life? Are there
Absolutely.
are there people that you maybe have a hard time with?
Sure.
Are there situations that are struggle situations for you? And how can you change that? You're giving little people some agency in how
Hmm.
they change their own approach. So,
Absolutely. And that's what happens in the story. They change, they grow, and they learn. And from point A to point B, each character has developed, each character has grown. And one of the other things that I love to mention about this book is that you can bring in a great STEAM and STEM activity with seasonal change.
yes.
So we start off, and obviously you can talk about the visuals of this first. So as you flip through the book, you'll notice that unlike a lot of other books, Little Red's outfit changes. And this is how I like to start pointing this out to my audience is we'll, kind of go through each page and we'll say, is Little Red wearing the same thing that he was on the last page? And sometimes he is, but then sometimes he isn't. And we also notice a very strong shift in the backgrounds happening. So you can talk about here, what are some of the colors that we're seeing? So I'll just ask you, what are some of the colors that we're seeing in the background here?
So we see greens and we see
Mhm.
blues and browns and a little bit of yellow in there.
Mhm. And then as we continue through the book, does this color scheme look exactly the same?
No, you've got oranges and you've got some different shades of green, some deeper
Mhm.
shadows. So we've moved into fall if you look at that
Yes,
tree.
absolutely. And you can also talk about Little Red's outfit. Long sleeves versus short sleeves signifies that we're not as warm as it was before. And then as we continue, then this is a huge shift.
We're into
Yes.
the winter and it is snowy. You've got white and green and brown, and the trees are bare and there's snow everywhere. And Little Red is dressed up for winter.
Yes. So you can also talk about time of day as well, because does this time of day look like the same as this time of day?
No, you've changed it to sunset. And I'm
Ex-
gonna bet even that you could talk about how the light changes earlier depending on where you are in the world at the different
Yes.
seasons.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of opportunities there because this book does again, unlike my other stories, because it does happen over a long period of time. And when you think about time in picture books, this is a whole nother lesson about time and time changing because a lot of stories happen like in one day.
Right.
Like you lose something, you go through the steps to find it, and you find it at the end of the day, and then you go to sleep. And, that's just because, again, you have to think about your audience when you're making these books. They're five, you know, and four, it's time is hard, I think, for adults to understand too. So it's really difficult when you're a little one trying to understand, and it's really easy to understand one day. So I think that's why a lot of picture books happen in a shorter period of time, or like a week, or something
Right.
like that. So that's the other thing that I loved about this story that I got to kind of play with something that was not normal for me in my writing, and especially in the art. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun with the art. So yes, lots of seasonal opportunities there as well.
I can tell, and I love that. And I was even looking at there's a point where Little Red has to bring Big Bad Fred to Great Grandpa's house. And
Hmm.
so that could also be one of those problem solving moments about, push and pull. And how are you going to move something that weighs that much? And you could
Yes.
even play with that in the classroom. Like you could have boxes, you could have laundry baskets,
Hmm.
and, you could have a kid sit in it. And how are you going to move this child from one side of the room to the other? So you could play some games with push and pull.
Yes. I love that. That would actually also work for Don't Wash Winston, since Liam pushes Winston around in a laundry basket quite a bit. So you could easily adapt that type of activity to a few of the other books as well. Pretty much all of them, honestly, would work.
Which is lovely when you've got something that you could adapt to multiple things. And,
100%.
other thing I was thinking about Little Red and Big Bad Fred, and you kind of referenced this, is you're entering that world of fractured fairy tales. And so I know
Mhm.
for me, when I'm working with early childhood, I love to have read alikes and sort of enter that world from those multiple points. And
Yeah,
there are a couple others I was going to just recommend to our audience to go with this because I think they sit really well together. The first is Troy Cummings and Tara Lazar's Little Red Gliding Hood.
I love this book.
And this one is such a good one for teaching friction, force and motion, and also collaboration. It's an unexpected teaming up of Little Red and the Wolf to be able to win the skates at the end of this competition. But they pair beautifully because it's that unexpected fracturing.
Hmm.
Um, Little Red and the Hungry Lion is another really good one because it's an unexpected solution to the problem. It's not the typical "I'm going to eat you up." It's figuring out, kind of like with you, how do we befriend somebody that's different from us? And so I think that they sit really well next together, and that's Alex T. Smith. Um, Frederico and the Wolf, you and this book are the only ones I know of where the little red character is a boy, and I love that
Uh-huh.
for both of them.
Yeah.
And in this one, we're getting the ingredients for salsa and trying to get to the house with our salsa ingredients. And so you could, as yours is in a much longer time period. This is a shorter one, but you could even do some unplugged coding with it and
Oh, yeah.
have kids follow directions and try to get around obstacles to be able to solve their problem. And then the last one I thought of that I would use in sort of a text set of these fractured fairy tales is Matt Cordell's Wolf in the Snow.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful, almost wordless picture book. And it's, again, those unexpected friendships that develop where the little red character winds up helping the baby wolf, and then the wolves help the little red character when
Mhm.
she gets lost. And so I think that I would put these together and, read them. And over the course of a couple of weeks, you can dive in and really go deep with this story and have so much literacy goodness as well as your STEM science goodness.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I hear from teachers a lot that, especially when I present at conferences and like that, and I talk about Little Red, because this has only been out since November. I talk about, and as soon as I say the term fractured fairy tale, the light comes into their face, and they're like, "Oh, we love doing compare and contrast." And I think that's one of the other like really great activities that you can do with all of those books as well as Little Red is you can do a compare and contrast with the original fairy tale that it's fracturing. And you can
Exactly.
do Venn diagrams, you can have kids make lists of things that are similar and different, and then you talk about those lessons. And you could even do that between fractured fairy tales themselves. You could line up these 5 or 6 books and talk about similarities and differences. And the lessons that you can learn from each one is different. So that's why I love this industry so much, because no two books are exactly the same.
Exactly. And, from that early childhood standpoint, you've got your read alikes, but you could also then set up that imaginative place center where they've got
Hmm.
invitations to come in and act out the different stories, to create their own fractured fairy tale by blending different elements that they like from the different books. And so you might have simple props that they could use. As you're doing these various science experiments, you could then put things like light and shadow in there, or
Hmm.
different clothes to do the different time of year. You could have puppets, you could have simple baskets they can carry. You could have the ingredients for salsa. I mean, there's so many different ways that kids could play with this, and you're allowing them the opportunity to take the reins and create it and make it their own.
Absolutely. And I think something else that's fun with books in general is when you can make it active reading time. Something that I will do a lot with Little Red is because Little Red is oftentimes seen like traveling on a path, is we'll do stand up read aloud. So everybody will stand up versus sit down and we'll march on the
Oh, I
path
love that.
and we'll look for Fred because a lot of times in the pictures he's hiding and little red doesn't see him until like the next spread or the next page. So we will do that and we'll go, we'll make sure that we're walking and then we'll all do this and we'll look for Fred, and then as soon as we find Fred we have to point as soon as we see Fred. And so that gets them up and engaged and active, because I think that's something else that can come pretty naturally with reading books is getting them up and moving their bodies too. I think that's something that's being pushed so much more, in schools, is getting up and moving and exercise. And, they're really stressing the importance of that, I think, more and more in the younger age groups, with, active play, but also with classes like doing yoga and mindfulness. And so when you can make them involved in the story and actually almost act it out as you're reading, that is extremely fun. And this one, I've done it with a lot of pre-K groups, and they're so cute marching on their little paths. And when they look and they see Fred, oh, it's the best.
I love it. And you kind of hit something that is really important to me, which is the idea that we really need to be deliberate in our read alouds. That
Yes,
they're not an extra that you tack on. They should
right.
be an integral part of your day. And it's something you're doing at morning circle. You're doing it in your centers. You're doing it at snack time. You're doing it at the end of the day. But there's excitement around it. You've got a
Mhm.
purpose. And I think that sometimes teachers get overwhelmed, and there's so much being thrown at them with curriculum that the
Sure.
read aloud gets thrown to the side.
Mhm.
And I would encourage them to include it, to be really deliberate. And if you're nervous, practice ahead of time. You
Yeah,
know, play with the book. Don't be afraid to lose your mind and be ridiculous. Kids love that.
they
And they
do.
will remember that so much more than they're going to remember a worksheet or, you know, having to sit quietly during
Hmm.
story time. They're going to remember the teacher who did the silly voices, who
Yes.
invited them to stand up and point and look for Fred. And
Yeah.
you're going to find that your classroom management actually gets better the more you get kids used to this kind of equal engagement as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and plus when they're asked to get up and say things, they don't feel like they have to just do it because they can't do it. Like you're inviting them to do the thing that they already want to do. They already want to get up. They already want to say things. They don't know what they want to say. They just want to talk sometimes, I think too. They just want to say words because they're curious and they want to ask questions. But I think more importantly, they just want to be involved.
Yes.
Kids so often when you're presenting, I never want my audience to feel like they're bored or like I'm talking at them. I want them to feel like I'm talking with them and that they are an active participant in whatever it is that I'm talking about or doing. So by inviting them to stand up, like I said, their impulse is it's really hard to get a kid to sit still.
Yes.
So by just being like, just stand up, a lot of times, even just standing will help them pay better attention because it's something that they are, like I said, already their mind is like, man, I really want to stand up because I'm being told to sit down. So when we stand up, then they're already actively engaged and they become Little Red or Fred or whoever they want to be that day in the
Right.
story.
I love that. And I think also the other piece with that read aloud is we're giving them that spark that's going to make them want to learn how to read themselves
Yes.
because
Oh
they're
gosh.
seeing the passion, they're seeing your love of reading shine through. And even if that's, a couple of stories a day, you're building
Hmm.
vocabulary, you're building desire. And
Yes.
so the how to read will come. You're going to have plenty of opportunities to dig into phonics, but you're building their phonological awareness as you're doing this read aloud. You're getting them excited about the way words sound, about where, when you were reading Little Red and Big Bad Fred, there was that spread where all the words are in big, bright red letters.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, that's such a great stopping point to be able to go, look, why do you think the author illustrator did that? And there it is. It's like, can we keep him? Please, please, please. I promise to feed him and walk him and love him every single day. And you can get kids to pay attention to that and to see the
Hmm.
words and to see that there's a reason that those
Yeah.
words are red and big.
Absolutely. And I think this is something else that you can rope back into talking about art because these types of books, of course, will work with pre-K. They will, of course, work with kindergarten, but they will also work with first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and up because you can talk about what goes into making these and making those choices. And you can talk about typography and how, in this case, yes, this is the story in these words, but these words are the art. The art is the words and how those two things really work together. Sometimes, sometimes it is just the words and the picture, and that's how they're paired. But sometimes they become more of the same thing. And that's a great lesson to talk about. I mean, you can still talk about that with little kids, they understand, but you can really talk about it with some of the older groups as well, and talking about how you can incorporate those two things as one. So there's so many lessons with art that you can pull from this as well.
I love that. So, Ashley, as we are wrapping up today's podcast, I am going to ask you the question that I know you've answered before, but I feel like it's an important question to ask every time. What's currently bringing you hope?
Oh my gosh, so many things are bringing me hope. I think every single time that I do a read aloud, it brings me hope. Honestly, that is what fuels me as an author. The opportunities that I'm getting to speak at conferences where I get to talk to teachers brings me hope because I get to share my passion with people who are equally as passionate. The other thing that brings me hope is art. I find so much comfort and joy and hope in art. And when I share my passion about that with kids and I see them drawing and how happy that makes them, that brings me so much hope because we need to do things that make us happy. Because when we are happy, we create happy things and put those out into the world. So I think as long as we can continue to share things that we're most passionate about with people like teachers who are with kids all the time, then we're doing our job.
I love that. And for the educators and parents and librarians who are listening, you bring us hope, and we're so grateful that you continue to read aloud and engage with children.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for joining me, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me back. Bye.